three of America's closest allies just delivered a devastating blow to Donald Trump's Middle East strategy. And the president is absolutely furious. The United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia have officially recognized a Palestinian state, marking a historic break with Washington and leaving Trump increasingly isolated on the world stage. While Trump fumes about betrayal, these nations are sending a clear message. They're done waiting for American leadership on peace in the Middle East. So what exactly happened? And why is this coordinated move by America's top allies such a massive problem for Trump's presidency? To understand the magnitude of this diplomatic earthquake, we need to grasp what just occurred. On Sunday, in what appears to be a carefully orchestrated announcement, Britain, Canada, and Australia simultaneously declared their formal recognition of a Palestinian state. This isn't just any group of countries, these are America's most trusted allies, members of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, and nations that have stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States through decades of global conflicts. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced the move in a video message, stating the recognition was intended to revive hope of peace for the Palestinians and Israelis. He was careful to emphasize that this wasn't a reward for Hamas, calling the terrorist organization brutal and insisting it can have no future, no role in government, no role in security in any Palestinian state. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney followed suit, writing on social media that Canada recognizes the state of Palestine and offers our partnership in building the promise of a peaceful future for both the state of Palestine and the state of Israel. The coordination was unmistakable. This was a unified message from America's closest Commonwealth allies. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese completed the trio, describing the recognition as part of a coordinated international effort to build momentum for a two-state solution. The language was deliberate, the timing precise, and the message clear. These nations were moving forward with or without American approval.
Well, I don't think we have the same influence as we used to have. That's clear. But I think people are taking notice because we had for a long time aligned our position on Israel and Palestine to that of the United States and Israel. And so this is a big shift. It's one that I think other countries are taking note. They often did not understand what Canada's position had been in the past. And so I think this bodes well in terms of Canada's relations around the world. But I think we have to also be mindful of managing our relationship with our largest trading partner and our neighbor, the superpower that is the United States, as we do just that.
Louise Blais, former Canadian diplomat and Deputy Permanent Representative of Canada to the United Nations. Thank you for this. Appreciate it.
But here's where it gets really interesting for Trump. This wasn't some surprise ambush. The writing had been on the wall for months. During Trump's state visit to Britain just last week, he had a tense exchange with Prime Minister Starmer about this very issue. When asked about the UK's plans to recognize Palestine, Trump openly admitted his displeasure, saying, "I have a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score." That public disagreement was a preview of what was coming. Despite Trump's clear opposition, despite his administration's unwavering support for Israel, and despite his threats of economic retaliation, America's closest allies went ahead anyway. They essentially told the President of the United States, "Thanks, but no thanks." The timing couldn't be worse for Trump's credibility. Just days before he was scheduled to address the United Nations General Assembly, where he would be speaking to many of the same world leaders who are now recognizing Palestine, his own allies publicly broke ranks. Trump discusses his engagement in seeking a Gaza ceasefire.
I have also been deeply engaged in seeking a ceasefire in Gaza. Unfortunately, Hamas has repeatedly rejected reasonable offers to make peace. We can't forget October 7th. Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. But instead of giving in to Hamas's ransom demands, those who want peace should be united with one message: release the hostages now. We have to stop the war in Gaza immediately. We have to stop it. We have to get it done. We have to negotiate, immediately have to negotiate peace. We got to get the hostages back. We want all 20 back. Not only is the UN...
He states Hamas has repeatedly rejected peace offers and criticizes UN body members seeking to recognize Palestinian state, calling for a unified message to release the hostages now. The optics are devastating. A president who can't even keep his closest friends in line on one of his signature foreign policy positions. Trump's reaction has been predictably explosive. His administration immediately condemned the move, with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stating that Trump has been very clear he disagrees with this decision. But disagreeing and being able to do something about it are two very different things. The president who once bragged about his deal-making abilities couldn't even make a deal with his own allies. At the UN, Trump claimed to have ended 7 unendable wars in just 7 months, including conflicts that had been ongoing for decades.
I have ended 7 unendable wars. They said they were unendable. You're never going to get them solved. Some were going for 31 years, 2 of them, 31, think of it, 31 years. One was 36 years. One was 28 years. I ended 7 wars. And in all cases, they were raging with countless thousands of people being killed. This includes Cambodia and Thailand, Kosovo and Serbia, the Congo and Rwanda, a vicious, violent war that was, Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan. It included all of them. No president or prime minister, and for that matter, no other country has ever done anything close to that. And I did it in just 7 months. It's never happened before. There's never been anything like that. I'm very honored to have done it. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator.
Some for 31 years, 36 years, and 28 years. He lists conflicts involving Cambodia and Thailand, Kosovo and Serbia, Congo and Rwanda, Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan. Yet despite these grandiose claims, he couldn't prevent his closest allies from recognizing Palestine. The economic threats Trump had made earlier are now looking increasingly hollow. Back in July, when Canada first announced its intention to recognize Palestine, Trump posted on his Truth Social platform, "Wow, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada." But Canada went ahead anyway, joined by Britain and Australia, suggesting that Trump's economic leverage isn't as powerful as he thought. This coordinated recognition represents something much deeper than a simple diplomatic disagreement. It signals a fundamental shift in how America's allies view their relationship with Washington. For decades, these countries have generally deferred to American leadership on major international issues, especially in the Middle East. But the Palestinian recognition shows they're willing to chart their own course when they believe American policy is wrong or counterproductive. The broader context makes this even more damaging for Trump. The recognition comes as Israel continues its military operations in Gaza, with the Palestinian death toll now exceeding 65,000 according to local health authorities. International pressure for a ceasefire has been mounting, and many world leaders have grown frustrated with what they see as America's unconditional support for Israeli actions. By recognizing Palestine, these allies are essentially saying that waiting for American-led peace negotiations has been a failed strategy. They're taking matters into their own hands, trying to create diplomatic momentum that might eventually force both Israelis and Palestinians back to the negotiating table. It's a direct challenge to Trump's approach of backing Israel completely while offering Palestinians little more than promises of future discussions. Trump's frustration with the UN itself became evident during his speech. He complained about everything from a broken escalator to the organization's ineffectiveness, stating that the UN is creating new problems rather than solving them.
In the middle.
For nearly an hour, Trump bounced between lecturing world leaders
Your countries are going to hell.
and offering to help fix their problems. urging them to enforce strict borders and abandon green policies.
If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail.
And he admonished countries like Canada that recognize the Palestinian state.
The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities.
But some of his sharpest criticisms were for the UN itself.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us.
He specifically highlighted uncontrolled migration as the #1 political issue and accused the UN of funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. The response from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been equally furious, but in a way that further undermines Trump's position. Netanyahu called the recognition an absurd prize for terrorism and declared that no Palestinian state will be established west of the Jordan River. He's scheduled to meet with Trump next week, presumably to coordinate a response to what both leaders see as a betrayal by their allies. But here's the problem for Trump. Netanyahu's absolute rejection of any Palestinian state puts the American president in an impossible position. If Trump continues to back Netanyahu's hardline stance, he risks further alienating allies who clearly believe a two-state solution is the only path to peace. If he tries to moderate Israel's position, he faces domestic political backlash from his pro-Israel base. During his UN address, Trump also launched into a strong criticism of green energy policies and climate change initiatives, calling climate change the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a wide-ranging speech today before the United Nations General Assembly. In it, he called climate change the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
The carbon footprint is a hoax. No more global warming, no more global cooling. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know. They actually said during the campaign they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true.
Should Trump's position on climate change dictate how this country proceeds with its climate agenda? Let's bring back the power panel. Emily Nicolas, Supriya Dwivedi, Peter MacKay, and Cheryl Oates. Supriya, I'll start with you on this one. Global warming, it's a hoax. I mean, we've heard the president talk about this before, but this seemed like another level when it comes to him denigrating the climate change fight, right?
Yeah, look, I mean,
He mocks the evolution from global cooling to global warming to climate change, saying they changed the name so they can't miss regardless of temperature changes. This further alienated him from European allies who view climate action as essential. The international implications extend far beyond the Middle East. When America's closest allies are willing to break ranks on such a significant issue, it sends a message to other countries that American leadership is no longer as influential as it once was. China and Russia are undoubtedly taking notes, recognizing that there are now clear limits to American diplomatic power. At the United Nations General Assembly this week, Trump found himself increasingly isolated. More than 140 countries now recognize Palestine as a state, with France expected to join the list soon. When Trump addressed the assembly, he was speaking to a room where a clear majority disagreed with his position on one of the most pressing international issues of the day. The domestic political implications for Trump are equally significant. His supporters elected him partly on promises of American strength and international respect. The image of America's closest allies publicly defying the president on a major policy issue hardly projects strength. It suggests instead a leader who has lost influence even among his most natural partners. Republican critics have tried to frame this as the allies being weak or caving to pressure, but that argument rings hollow when applied to countries like Britain, Canada, and Australia, nations with strong democratic traditions and robust security relationships with the United States. These aren't countries that make foreign policy decisions lightly or under duress. The economic dimensions add another layer of complexity. Trump has built much of his foreign policy around the threat of economic consequences, tariffs, trade deals, market access. but his threats against Canada over Palestine recognition have proven empty, and similar threats against Britain and Australia would likely be equally ineffective. These are major economies with diverse trading relationships. They're not dependent on American approval for their economic survival. Looking ahead, this recognition by key allies creates momentum for additional countries to follow suit. European nations that have been hesitant to take such a step may now feel emboldened, seeing that even America's closest friends are willing to break with Washington on this issue. The diplomatic isolation Trump faces today could become even more pronounced in the coming weeks and months. The Palestinian recognition also highlights the broader challenge Trump faces in his second term, a world that has moved on from American hegemony. During his first presidency and the Biden interregnum, other countries developed their own relationships, their own approaches to international problems, and their own sources of legitimacy. They're no longer automatically deferring to Washington's preferences. For Palestinians, this recognition represents a significant diplomatic victory, even if it's largely symbolic. Having major Western powers acknowledge their statehood provides international legitimacy and could pave the way for eventual UN membership, despite American opposition. It also puts pressure on Israel to engage more seriously with the possibility of a two-state solution. The Israeli response has been to double down on settlement expansion and reject any notion of Palestinian statehood, but this hardline approach is increasingly isolated internationally. Even Israel's traditional allies are now saying that the status quo is unsustainable and that Palestinian rights must be acknowledged. Trump's failure to prevent this allied defection reveals the limits of his transactional approach to foreign policy. International relationships aren't just about deals and leverage, they're about shared values, common interests, and mutual respect. When allies believe American policy is fundamentally wrong, they're willing to act independently, regardless of economic or political pressure. The broader implications for American foreign policy are profound. If the United States can't maintain allied unity on issues where it has strong preferences and significant leverage, how can it hope to build coalitions on more challenging problems like China's rise, climate change, or global economic governance? The Palestine recognition suggests that the era of automatic allied deference to American preferences may be ending. This diplomatic setback comes at a particularly bad time for Trump's presidency. He's facing domestic challenges, international skepticism about his trade policies, and now open rebellion from his closest allies on a signature foreign policy issue. The image of American leadership that he's trying to project is being undermined by the very countries that should be his strongest supporters. The Palestine recognition by Britain, Canada, and Australia represents more than just a diplomatic disagreement. It's a fundamental challenge to Trump's approach to international leadership. These allies have essentially told the American president that they're willing to go their own way when they believe he's wrong, regardless of the consequences for the bilateral relationships. For a president who has staked so much on projecting strength and winning respect from other world leaders, this public defection by America's closest allies is a devastating blow. It suggests that Trump's influence on the world stage may be more limited than either he or his supporters want to admit. As more countries potentially follow suit in recognizing Palestine, Trump's isolation on this issue, and perhaps others, may only deepen. The question now is whether Trump can find a way to rebuild allied consensus, or whether this marks the beginning of a more fragmented Western alliance, where America's traditional partners increasingly chart their own courses on major international issues. Based on the coordinated nature of this Palestinian recognition, the answer may already be clear. The age of automatic allied deference to American preferences is over, and Trump is learning that lesson the hard way.